I'm Brianna Keeler, live from CNN's Washington headquarters. Underway right now. Democrats say, give us documents. The White House says, nah. So now the defiance sets up a showdown with Congress. The president deserves a whipping for insulting John McCain, says one Republican senator, while most of his colleagues remain silent. Plus, President Trump weighs in on the marriage of one of his top aides, saying publicly that Kellyanne Conway's spouse is, quote, the husband from hell. And with one of Boeing's newest models of 737 still grounded, chilling new details in the first of two crashes, including how pilots raced through the flight manual even as the plane was going down. President Trump says let the public see the Mueller report when it comes out. He was asked about the report just moments ago, and we have White House correspondent Abby Phillip in Lima, Ohio, where the president will be speaking next hour. So, Abby, what more did the president say?
Well, Brianna, the president continued his attacks on the Mueller investigation, the special counsel probe, but he did say that he doesn't know when it's going to come out, and he doesn't have a problem with the public seeing that report when it eventually does come out. Now, this is coming at a time when the president is facing a number of different inquiries, not just from the Mueller report, but also from Congress. He's getting requests from the Oversight Committee, from the House Judiciary Committee for documents on a number of different issues, some of them related to the same issues that the Mueller investigation is probing, Russian interference in the 2016 election, and others related to other things, like the security clearance process at the White House. And so far, according to the House Oversight Committee chairman, the White House hasn't provided a single document in response to their request for documentation. Now, that is an extraordinary escalation for this White House, and it seems to signal that they are aggressively trying to slow down these investigations, trying to put the brakes on what the president has considered to be Democratic overreach. He's called it presidential harassment, but I think it sets us up for at least another several weeks and months of combat between the president and the House committees, even potentially after this Mueller investigation wraps up. It seems, Brooke, that the president is waiting, just like we are, for that report to come out, but I'm sorry, Brianna, but he's waiting for that report to come out, but he's taking a combative approach to it, to the House and to the Mueller report on both of those fronts, because this is about to be, I think, a pretty difficult period for him and for his presidency, Brianna.
And he has been attacking a lot of people, but he's also been attacking one of his top aides' husband, Kellyanne Conway's husband. Tell us about this.
Yeah, speaking of escalations, I think this has gone from being George Conway tweeting his thoughts about the president and his fitness for office to it being really kind of a window into the marriage of Kellyanne and George Conway, with the president smack dab in the middle. President Trump this morning tweeting that George Conway is a loser, and then saying this on the lawn as he was leaving the White House this afternoon.
I don't know him. I don't know him. He's a whack job. There's no question about it. But I really don't know him. I think he's doing a tremendous disservice to a wonderful wife. Kellyanne is a wonderful woman, and I call him Mr. Kellyanne. The fact is that he's doing a tremendous disservice to a wife and family. She's a wonderful woman.
So, Brianna, all this drama is playing out in public, and, I have to say, White House aides haven't really been addressing George Conway. The president hasn't really addressed him. He's called him Mr. Kellyanne Conway in the past, but today and yesterday, I think we're seeing the president changing his strategy. He's going on the attack, and he's defending his top aide, but in the process, he's kind of getting in the middle of their marriage as well, which is an extraordinary thing to happen on the world stage here, Brianna.
Especially in that tweet where he said the president, that it was with Kellyanne Conway's help that he denied George Conway a job. George Conway has said that he didn't want the job. Go on, Abby.
Exactly. That's exactly right. George Conway has disputed that version of events, saying that he turned it down. But again, this is the crux of the problem here, is that there is now a breach, not just between George Conway and the president, but it seems George Conway and his wife. I'm not sure if Kellyanne would even agree with that version of events about denying her husband a job in the administration that she currently works in as well, Brianna.
All right, Abby Phillip in Lima, Ohio, where the president is headed. Thank you. And in the meantime, Meghan McCain is firing back at President Trump for his repeated attacks on her late father, Senator John McCain.
I'm just surprised because I do think this is a new bizarre low.
Yeah.
I will say attacking someone who isn't here is a bizarre low, but my dad's not here, but I'm sure as hell here.
And she is not the only outspoken voice, though possibly the most outspoken voice. Senior GOP Senator Johnny Isakson is speaking out in a new interview. He's the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, and this is what he said, quote, "I just want to lay it on the line that the country deserves better, and the McCain family deserves better. I don't care if he's president of the United States, owns all the real estate in New York, or is building the greatest immigration system in the world. Nothing is more important than the integrity of the country and those who fought and risked their lives for all of us." End quote. We have columnist and associate editor for Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard, who talked exclusively to Senator Isakson. So you broke this story, and this is what he told you, but he's also going to be speaking publicly. When will we hear from him?
Today, between 2 and 2:35, he's appearing on Georgia Public Broadcasting Channel on a show called Political Rewind, where he'll be talking about this subject.
And is this what you expect, or you expect him to say more than what he's told you?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I know
he'll listen.
I know he'll likely be asked about several things. He voted with the president on the emergency declaration last week. I think he'll be answering a lot of questions from some members of the Georgia press, and he might elaborate on what he told me. We'll be listening with great interest.
He made it clear back in August that that John McCain should not be insulted, and it bothered him that the flag was lowered to half-mast almost reticently and put back up rather quickly at the White House. But he's now making good kind of on what he said in the summer, which was this is not appropriate. However, there's not a lot of Republicans that are. Why do you think that is?
The president has put the Republican Party in a very bad place where they cannot defend a dead war hero that the president is fighting with. You've seen Mitt Romney come out and say things like, he defended John McCain in very clear terms, but he said, I wonder why the president is doing this. Lindsey Graham gave a meek tribute the other night on Twitter with people urging him to come to the senator's defense, but he did not say anything about President Trump. What Johnny Isakson is doing, he's the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, is trying to speak out about how damaging this is to the integrity of our country and to the veterans who risk their lives for us, and that is a part of our national fabric and our pride, and that this is an attack really on all veterans to sort of ignore this and normalize it in silence. And a lot of people are staying silent for political reasons, but I think it's a very strange world, Brianna, when it's news that the Veterans Affairs Committee chairman is the only one who's coming out and telling the president that this is damaging.
You say he's putting them, Republicans, in a bad spot. They may be in a bad spot, but they have a choice to make.
They do. But the president has decided that, you're with me or against me. You've seen the way he treats members of his own party in Congress. He doesn't work to protect them. They will be asked about this on the campaign trail next year, no question. It's really, he sort of considers himself a party of one, and you need to fall in line and follow. And that includes his list of grievances and his perceived political enemies. And he, obviously believes that John McCain is one.
All right. The late Senator John McCain. Thank you so much, A.B. Stoddard. We really do appreciate the scoop. And so we're learning now more about why Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is sticking around the Justice Department just a little while longer than he had originally planned. A source tells CNN that he's staying to act as a heat shield to absorb any of the fallout from the release of the Mueller report. We have political reporter Sarah Murray here with that part of the story. So there's this delayed departure by Rod Rosenstein and members of Mueller's team also who are suggesting that this is a busy week for them. They've asked for a continuance in releasing some documents, and that was their justification for it. Tell us where this investigation stands right now.
Well, I mean, we're reading the clues to try to figure that exact thing out. I mean, you heard the president say he doesn't know when this report is coming and count all of Washington in the same boat on that. But we are getting a couple clues here and there. I mean, one of them is Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general, was slated to leave essentially any day now. He's now going to be sticking on for a little while longer. What that timeline is, we don't know. But he wants to be there when the Mueller report is actually released. You mentioned, a source told us he wants to be the heat shield. That essentially means he wants to be the guy who's out out there taking the punches, taking the bullets to the extent that they come, that criticism comes when the report is released, because he's been the primary guy who's been overseeing this investigation. Now, separately, prosecutors were facing this deadline to respond to an effort to unseal some documents in Paul Manafort's case, and they wrote to the judge and they said they have a press of other work that they are dealing with. They're very, very busy this week, and so they're asking for an extension of the deadline. Unclear if that means it's because they're working on the Mueller report or perhaps some other investigative matter. So we continue to wait, Brianna.
It is interesting to hear them say that. Of course, they're still holding the details close to the vest. So we'll have to wait and see, as you said, what it means. Sarah Murray, thank you so much for that. Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois is a member of both the House Oversight and the Intelligence Committees, and he's with us now from Chicago. Sir, thanks for being with us.
Sure thing, Brianna. Thank you.
So first of all, what is your reaction to Rod Rosenstein's decision to stay on longer? Because according to sources, he wants to be around to absorb the punches if there's any fallout from the Mueller report.
Well, I think a lot of us on Capitol Hill have been glad that Rod Rosenstein has done everything to try to protect the Mueller investigation from outside interference. So his continued presence is a good thing, in my opinion.
I also want to ask you about something the president just said. He said he doesn't mind if the public sees Robert Mueller's report. How do you square that with the White House expecting to see the Mueller report before Congress as they look possibly to exert executive privilege?
Well, they might be trying to have it both ways. On the one hand, they want to, have people review the report potentially with an eye toward concealing parts of it from the public. But on the other hand, he knows that saying that hiding the Mueller report is his policy is a loser in terms of public opinion. You just saw this the other day. 420 members of the House voted in favor of releasing the report, and that unanimous sentiment in the House, I think, also mirrors what the public wants too.
Now, that was held in the Senate because of Senator Lindsey Graham, we should point out.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And which some folks read into because he has been supportive of the president in many ways. So when you look at this, the White House having this report before Congress, do you think that part of it is prepping a PR message to combat whatever is in the report? Or are you worried that they are going to successfully argue that some or a lot of the report should be redacted?
Well, in my humble opinion, aside from national security concerns or classified information, which obviously should be withheld from public consumption, the rest of the report should be turned over along with the evidence supporting the report. If it's not, obviously folks like Adam Schiff and others on other committees can also subpoena the report as well as the underlying documents, as well as Robert Mueller to come forward and explain any gaps that might exist in William Barr's recounting or summary of that report to Congress.
Do you trust this Justice Department to make sure the White House doesn't get in the way of Congress getting the full story here? Because you're talking about subpoenas. It sounds like perhaps you do not.
I hope it doesn't come to a subpoena, Brianna. I think that, as I said, the House voted overwhelmingly the other day to have the public see this report. I think the American people deserve that, and they're demanding that. So anything less is something that I hope people on both sides will object to. Certainly we will, and I think that's why the American people wanted us to be in the majority, to serve as a check and balance on the White House, especially with regard to this Mueller investigation.
So you are on the Oversight Committee. Your chairman, Elijah Cummings, says the White House hasn't turned over any requested documents for any investigation, and there's a number of them. You've got the review of White House security clearances. There's an investigation of the president's hush money payments to women he allegedly had affairs with. White House officials' use of personal email in violation of federal law. That's a question that your committee is looking into. What are Democrats prepared to do to get those documents?
Well, I think Chairman Cummings is one of the most reasonable, patient members of Congress you're ever going to find. He has been patiently requesting voluntary compliance with document requests over a number of months, and yet the White House refuses to turn over documents And they did this, by the way, with the Republican committee chairman as well. Now that we're in the majority, we know that we're in the majority because the American people want us to serve as a check and balance.
So what can you do?
If they don't turn these documents over, as Chairman Cummings says within the op-ed, they should not be surprised to receive some subpoenas at this point, because we need answers to serious questions about serious controversies. I'll just point out one. The security clearance process is messed up. The fact that Jared Kushner could have access to top secret materials, despite the fact that every law enforcement official who's looked at it says that he should not, is a serious problem.
But if they sweep aside the subpoena, if they don't comply with the subpoena, what options do you have?
Well, I think that we would probably try to enforce the subpoena in court. Unfortunately, it could go to litigation. I would just respectfully say that the White House would be better served through voluntary compliance with document requests than actually meeting with a subpoena, which could ask for a much more sweeping set of documents and materials and witnesses. And therefore, I think voluntary compliance might be the best course for them. That being said, we are not going to wait for voluntary compliance to get access to the materials.
Is that the strategy, to tell them if they're not going to volunteer some materials, the scope is going to be much broader and you're going to work to compel them to reveal even more and for this to be even more painful for them?
Well, it's not about pain. It's about having access to more documents and materials potentially in scope, because we may not be able to trust the White House to actually answer the voluntary requests as honestly and in the spirit of good faith that we would want them to show. And therefore, I think it would be best in their best interest to answer the voluntary requests right now and allow us to review the materials. And then obviously, we would want to question witnesses as well.
All right, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brianna.
New CNN poll numbers on the 2020 race show that one candidate is making a big jump as others are seeing their popularity. From the polls to the fundraising, it's all about the numbers in the race for the White House. And today's big figure is a record-breaking $6.1 million. That is the amount that Beto O'Rourke raised on the first day of his presidential campaign. CNN political reporter and editor-at-large Chris Cillizza is here to put that number and a few others into context for us. So I guess it's important to compare this one to Bernie Sanders, who is sort of the lord of bringing in a lot of small donations that added up to a lot of money.
Exactly right. So let's run through that quickly, Brianna, because you're right, it's important. Okay, 6.1 versus 5.9. That's a ton of money to raise in 24 hours. Now, Sanders, more donors, and of course that means his average donation, 27 versus 47, lower. What does this mean? It means that Sanders can go back to more people and say, hey, you gave me 27, can you give me another 100 or another 50? It means that O'Rourke probably is a little bit more dependent on some people who maxed out, meaning they gave him the most, about $2,800 that you can give, Brianna, to a campaign. But in truth, these are hugely impressive numbers by both men. I would say, especially by Beto O'Rourke. Candidly, he was a congressman from the border that no one had heard of 2 years ago. And now we're talking about, in the same sentence as Bernie Sanders, who redefined what it means to raise money online. Brianna.
So that is the fundraising. Now take us through the latest polls.
Okay, I was an English major in college. It's a lot of numbers for me. But yes, okay, here we go. Now, there is a lot of good news for Bernie Sanders, but one thing that I would note from our most recent poll that's a little bit of bad news here. Okay, here's his favorability numbers in our December poll and then now, okay? His favorability dropped marginally, 51-46. This is your bigger concern, I think. His unfavorable number went from 35 to 43. A lot of this is the unsure is about the same. This number is important. And the reason it's important, Brianna, remember, when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, very few people had heard of him until he got into the race and got some traction. He got very little negative press. There was not a lot of opposition research done on him. Hillary Clinton, despite what the Sanders people will say, Hillary Clinton didn't really attack him that much. Very different race. Now let's go to the overall race. Okay, and as I said, there's still some good news here for Bernie Sanders. He's in second place. He's up 6 points. Joe Biden's still in first. This is statistically insignificant, hovering the same. Here's the number that's the most important. From 4 to 12, Kamala Harris. Harry Enton and I do rankings every month on the people most likely to win the Democratic nomination. Harris has been number one in our rankings for the last 5 months. And the reason is Because although she was at 4, it was clear the excitement and energy for her. She's first Indian American and African American senator from California. There was a lot there to like, and Democratic voters are starting to like it as they get to know her. Brianna.
Chris, an English major. I'm learning.
I did it.
Interesting. All right, Chris Liza, thank you so much. Why was it allowed to fly? A stunning new report says that an off-duty pilot saved that doomed Lion Air jet from crashing just the day before its deadly nosedive into the sea. We're going to have details on that. Plus, disturbing messages of hate. Senator John McCain's widow sharing the disgusting insults that she's getting in the wake of the president's new attacks on her late husband. Where is the GOP?
This is CNN Breaking News.
Of 2 Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashes. The day before the crash of a Lion Air 737 MAX 8 back in October, there were different pilots flying that same plane, and they fought to control it as it went into a dive. There was a third pilot who just happened to be there. He was off duty, and he was in the cockpit jump seat. He figured out that this was the malfunctioning flight control system, and he helped the crew get out of the dive, according to 2 sources in this Bloomberg report. Alan Levin is here. He is one of the reporters, along with Harry Suhartono, who broke this story, and he covers aviation safety. And we're also joined by CNN aviation analyst Peter Goals. Alan, tell us more about what you discovered.
Well, this is a very critical flight because all of the flight crew survived, unlike what happened the next day, but they had an identical failure. Shortly after takeoff, all these alarms start going off. And they get what's called a stick shaker, which indicates it's a very dire situation, that an aerodynamic stall is occurring. They're going through checklists. They can't figure out what's going on. And then after a little bit of altitude, the plane starts trying to dive on its own. Very stunning sort of thing that was confusing. Yeah. The gentleman in the jump seat is the one who suggested, after a period of multiple dives, to shut off the motor that was pushing the plane down, and it ended up saving them.
My goodness. Okay, Peter, when you hear this report, what does this tell you, not just about the Lion Air crash, but potentially about the Ethiopia Air crash and about some of the other complaints that we've heard from pilots that have now come to light after both of these crashes?
Well, it does underscore the pilots' concern that they were not trained properly on this new MCAS system. I mean, the idea that it took a third person uninvolved with the crisis taking place to diagnose it is stunning. And these guys were in a dire situation, but they were able to solve it once they figured out what was wrong. And apparently the solution was buried in the flight manual.
Buried in the flight manual, and that they were not aware of it. And one of the stunning things, Alan, about your report is that essentially it's like Indonesia's NTSB, right? That put out, as the NTSB would do in a crash, a report on what happened. And this wasn't in it. Why?
That is a very good question. As Peter knows from when he was at NTSB, if you have a witness in the cockpit, you would want to interview him. You'd want to document that in the report. I'm led to believe that will occur going forward, but it was not in this initial report, and it is a very good question.
And so in the normal case, I would imagine, let's say the flight where they were successful in disabling this motor, the normal procedure, one would assume, is that this gets reported. Anytime you have a problem like that in an airplane, wouldn't this somehow percolate upwards, this information, you would hope?
Well, that is a broader question. I mean, this was a safety of flight issue that they were not, that did not make it to the flight managers to say, wait a minute, this plane, even though our overnight maintenance have said they've repaired it, let's take it up for a check ride and make sure that it is repaired. This is going to make Lion Air review their safety procedures.
You said the fix was buried in the flight manual, so it is in the flight manual? Is that right?
No, I'm saying how you shut off the MCAS system is in the flight manual. It's a runaway
But you have to make
trim.
that cognitive leap of this is the thing we have to shut off.
You have to make the analysis.
So to that point, Reuters is now reporting from the voice recorder in the Lion Air flight that the pilots were scouring the flight manual. This is what, as the plane went down, you can imagine, they don't have any time, and they didn't have any time.
Here's the stunning thing about that. They should have been scouring the flight manual, but the procedure to shut off this motor is what's called a memory item. It's so critical, it's sort of equivalent to, say, an engine fire or something like that, that you're required to memorize it in training, this so-called runaway trim thing, because it happens so quickly and can, cause you to go into a dire dive very quickly. So you have to know off the top of your head how to do it. And for some reason, they didn't put two and two together and realize that.
And why wouldn't they? Is that something you would link to the training that Boeing was supposed to provide on this? There have been a lot of complaints that Boeing didn't provide enough. Peter, what do you think?
Well, I think it's also, it's not only Boeing's responsibility, it's the air carrier's responsibility to know that the pilots they're putting in the right and left seats know fully how to confront problems and how to fly the aircraft safely.
So, and just real quickly, you said this is a memory item. But was it something that they were aware of, that it should be a memory item? Did they just mess up by not having it kind of in that?
This is not a memory item for the new MAX. It's a memory item for every 737 they've ever made, dating back almost 50 years. So in theory, they clearly should have known about this.
All right. Alan, thank you so much. And Peter, we really appreciate both of your expertise. A Vietnam veteran brought to tears after hearing President Trump's attacks against the late Senator John McCain. This is according to Senator Amy Klobuchar. And moments from now, a Republican senator is expected to take the president to task over his criticism of McCain. Plus, a source telling CNN that the Patriots owner, Robert Kraft, is going to reject a plea deal in connection to his prostitution case. Moments from now, we will hear from GOP Senator Johnny Isakson. He's one of only a few Republicans speaking out against the president's continued attacks on the late Senator John McCain.
I was never a fan of John McCain, and I never will be.
And in the wake of those comments and these tweets, Cindy McCain, who lost her husband less than 7 months ago, posted a message that she received, a very hateful rant directed at her husband's legacy and her daughter, Megan, who has defended her dad against the president. And the outrage and hurt is going beyond Washington. Democratic presidential hopeful Amy Klobuchar posted this video of a Vietnam veteran brought to tears in part, she says, by the president's attacks on McCain.
No one knows better than you how to right?
Former Pennsylvania Congressman Charlie Dent and former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum here with me now. Why, Senator, do you think the president keeps coming back to these attacks on John McCain?
Well, I mean, I think in response, I guess there were some things out there recently by someone related to McCain that offended him, and so it sort of gets him going, and he goes off on John McCain. Look,
I'm aside from the trigger, right? Not just the trigger. What is in his, what do you think? So he's triggered by John McCain is gone, okay?
Yeah.
But what is it that triggers him about John McCain? Do you think?
I don't know. You're asking me to psychoanalyze the president. I'm not going to do that. Let George Conway do that. I'll stick to the fact that the president is not behaving presidential, and I know that his supporters, and I'm one of them, talk about how he can't be blamed for all of this hostility and notes to Cindy McCain and things like that, and that's right, because that kind of activity happens all the time. But you're going to be blamed if you act the way the president acts. I don't think there is a tie, candidly, but it's a legitimate criticism if the president continues these types of untoward, crude attacks, that he's going to get blamed for creating a culture that is encouraging that.
Is there a tie? Because anytime someone goes on television and says, I'll be interested to see what kind of tweet responses you get, Senator, just for saying it's not. You just said it wasn't presidential. That wasn't, you're not coming down too hard. But anytime someone goes on TV and they say that this is not appropriate, that this denigrates an amazing service that John McCain provided, they get hate tweets from the president's supporters.
Well, it's loathsome to
make this kind of attack on John McCain. It's disrespectful. I don't know about you, but my parents are, you don't speak ill of the dead. I mean, I don't know why he would do this. Maybe the healthcare issue sets him off. Maybe John McCain had a different worldview than President Trump. And I think that maybe plays into this a bit too. But I don't know what sets off the president. But it's just simply so disrespectful. I can't imagine why he would do this.
And what does it say? Like, I wonder what you think now, looking at your party, and there are members of Congress who do not feel politically they're in a position to defend. Maybe not John, maybe they don't like John McCain, but they don't feel that they can defend the war record of someone who spent 5 years as a POW. What does that say about the state of the GOP?
I don't think it's as much that they don't want to defend it. I just don't think they want to be in a position of having to comment every time the president does this, because it would be a daily occurrence. And I think they just decided.
I would say this one's different, because this isn't just about John McCain. This is about service in the military. I mean, do you disagree with me on that?
No, I do disagree, because look, this is about John McCain. The fact that he comments on his service and he comments on his record at the Naval Academy. Look, I sat in an audience in Iowa during the primary in 2016 and heard the president, but then Donald Trump say that John McCain isn't a war hero. And, he's a loser. I mean, folks who get captured aren't heroes. I was stunned. You could hear a gasp. Yet, at the end, they applauded him and supported him. So I just think that most Republicans see the president. Everybody understands that he does things that are completely, in my opinion, outrageous at times and certainly unorthodox. And that's just something that they'll tolerate in order to get the policies that he's trying to put forward. I was in a debate that was sponsored by a Tea Party in 2016 in the general election. And I was defending John McCain for all the terrible things the president had said about him not being a war hero. Somebody blurted out that John McCain was an idiot. I stopped immediately. I called the person out. Said, how can you say such a thing? And there are people sitting in the audience wearing Vietnam veteran caps. And it was just stunning to me that people would say these kinds of things. But if the president's going to say disparaging things about John McCain, I guess maybe that enables some of his supporters to say similar things. I've seen it.
Yeah, it does enable them. I want to ask you about something different, which is that Ronald Reagan's daughter, Patty Davis, has spoken out against the president. Here's some of what she said.
I think he would be horrified. I think he would be heartbroken, because he loved this country a lot and he believed in this country.
It's important to point out here, Senator, she's not a Republican, right? That's important to point out. She did go on to shame your party for allowing the president to get away with what he has gotten away with, to your point. What do you think?
Well, look, Ronald Reagan had the 11th commandment, which is not to speak ill of another Republican. Now, I can tell you he didn't do that necessarily when he ran for president in 1976 and in 1980 in the Republican primary. I mean, he was tough, but it was within the bounds of sort of normal political discourse. And what I think the commandment really was is, once the election's over, you sort of try to be civil, particularly within your own party. And John McCain was, certainly someone who was more of a moderate and someone who did some things to upset the president. But it doesn't get Reagan's credo was it doesn't win you any points to try to get things done by attacking people in your own party. And I think the president and frankly, the problems he's having up on Capitol Hill is starting to reflect that.
What do you think, Congressman?
Well, I can't for the life of me understand, why the president says the things he says. And I am really stunned that more Republicans aren't pushing back, not just on these outlandish.
But do you talk to them, and do they tell you why they feel they can't?
They're all worried about primaries. It's about base pressure. I mean, that's pretty much it. Even on this recent vote on the emergency declaration, my guess is most Republicans supported that disapproval resolution. Fewer voted for it, simply because they're worried about base pressure, primary pressure, and I think that's what's driving all this.
Really good point. Congressman, Senator, thank you so much for the discussion. And moments from now, the president will appear in Ohio as he says the public should see the Mueller report. Plus, just in, Kellyanne Conway now defending the president over the feud with her husband, another bizarre twist in this war of the words.